This game really is Pocahontas with fucking robots. I ain't joking about that shit in the title, man. This is as close to an idea of someone saying, what would Pocahontas look like fighting against some fucking robot dinosaurs in this motherfucker? But regardless of how I explain the game, I will say this. Guerrilla Games made a pretty damn good game, and I'm going to be very honest with you guys for a second. I didn't expect this game to succeed in the way it did. I honestly thought this was going to be a flop of a game, and I really didn't pay too much attention to it, figuring it was going to find a way to be crappy. So, my expectations were low, yet the game came in and exceeded expectations and then some. Shit, that's a lesson the YouTube order can take instead of having to go fuck himself every time. Now, let's recap for a second. For those who don't know, Guerrilla Games works. They worked on the Killzone series, which is supposed to be a Halo killer. Bullshit. That was supposed to be Sony's answer to Halo, and while the graphics of the game were utterly fucking top-notch, and the AI was by far the smartest AI of its time when it released all those years ago, the game was obviously no Halo killer. It was alright, nothing more than an average game with some of the technical aspects that were on par with some of the greatest games ever made, but it was a fairly mundane story and gameplay. So when they announced that Horizon Zero Dawn was going to come out, I really didn't think this game was going to be anything fantastic. I figured it was going to be another average game with maybe some top-notch graphics. Obviously, they're able to do that shit, but it would fall flat on the story and the gameplay. However, they've exceeded some expectations in that regard, and it turned out to be a pretty good game. Is it Game of the Year? Doubtful, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see the game get nominated here and there in some publications because it was overall well done. For being a brand new IP, in other words, not a sequel, it's not a continuation of a character who's been on tons of games like Zelda or some shit like that. It's not a series that rebooted itself like Resident Evil. It has no ties to any other game. This is brand new intellectual property from Guerrilla Games. Along with Neo, it's probably in line to be one of the best new properties of the year. And along with Neo, and also Nier Automata, Sony has just rolled out a trio of exclusives that have added some decent games to people's libraries. So Sony must be pretty happy with that right now because this is a pretty good time to actually release games. You know, with this whole late winter, early release spring where there's not a lot of games and shit like that. So for those of you who are playing the game, I'm pretty sure you're probably enjoying this shit. Oh, you beat the fucking thing already. Who knows? Me personally, I'm taking my time to beat this shit because I need a game to stretch the time before Mass Effect Andromeda comes out. But for those of you who didn't get the game and you're wondering what's a good game comparison, the classification of the game says that it's an open world action RPG, but overall I would drop the RPG portion of it and I would call it more of an action adventure. It's less Mass Effect Fallout and more Assassin's Creed than anything. Actually, that's probably the game that I would say this closely resembles. It's like Assassin's Creed more than any other game, and that's a mix of a bunch of other games thrown into there for good measure. You control Pocahontas, otherwise known as Aloy in the game, and the story takes you from her mysterious birth to the circumstances of how the tribe treats you all the way to the fucking end of the game, which I don't know yet because obviously I haven't gotten there myself. Along the way, you fight robots that resemble real-world animals and dinosaurs and shit like that. You know, some that look like horses, some that look like a deer, Tyrannosaurus Rex, big giant fucking birds, crabs and shit. You know, the adventure starts, of course, small in your tiny little opening area. Then eventually it expands into the large open world that the game created, where you get to run tasks, missions, do shit to get to the end of the fucking game, and this is where you see the graphics are absolutely stunning. I'll tell you this right now. I have a high-end TV, 75-inch 4K HDR, motherfucker. I didn't play games on that shit. And this has to be the most stunning game that I've seen on that TV as of yet. You know, Final Fantasy was incredible to look at, but this tops that motherfucker. You know, I guess until Xbox releases Scorpio later this year, this is going to be the game that people compare to against graphics because Guerrilla has some top-notch graphics in this game. You know, Final Fantasy has some amazing detail when it comes to the backgrounds and whatnot, but the up-close environment graphics weren't as detailed as this game. You know, the vistas Final Fantasy had were in great fucking detail, but they have nothing on the rocks and the grass and the weather effects that this game has. Holy shit. And obviously, graphics aren't anything because I'm sure there'll be some Nintendo fanboys out there that'll be like, oh, Zelda is the greatest game ever right now. Blow it out your ass, you Hyrule ass-kissing motherfucker. I'll address Zelda a little later. But outside of the graphics, the gameplay mechanics are on point. The variety of enemies is wide enough that you don't feel like you're fighting the same robot over and over and over again. You know, the only true knock on the game that I will say is that after a while, it's going to begin to feel a little similar. Not so much repetitive, because obviously every game has some form of repetition, but you know what to expect with enemies. You know what a bandit camp is going to look like. You know what a corruption site is going to look like, or hunting grounds, whatever the fuck it is. There's variety, but within the same type of side mission or errand, that's where you're going to start noticing a little bit of the repetition. Also, it took me a little while to get the hang of that fucking bow. Oh man, I'm not gonna lie about that shit. Mainly it's because of the delay in the shooting the shit. You draw the motherfucker, you hold it, you fire the motherfucker. Oh, fuck me, man. I just like to point and fire and not have to think about having to lead a motherfucker with a goddamn arrow. This shit was fucking irritating, but you know what? I get it. I finally got the hang of this shit, so now I'm a little used to how the game actually works. For the first whole part of the game in the opening area and shit, I was just sitting in the bushes waiting to ambush shit. I ain't gonna lie, man. That was perfectly how I started the game. Sit in a bush, whistle, motherfucker come over, I stab him in his goddamn neck. But eventually, you start facing robots that don't fall for that shit, or they're too big to take down with a melee, like fucking Behemoth or Thunderjaw, which will fuck you up if you try to get close. So you have to learn how to use all the tools of the game. Unlike a game like, say, BioShock. That's probably one of my favorite games, and I've always said that's probably the pinnacle of new development when it came to the last gen consoles, but BioShock was fucking easy to beat. For all the splicers, all you needed was the shock power and the melee wrench. That's it. For Big Daddies, all you needed was trap bolts to drop their ass, and you could beat the game with just those items. That's all you needed. But in this game, you need more tactics than just hiding in a bush and ambushing a motherfucker when they're not looking, although that was my cheap little strategy. Now, as you'll progress in the game, you'll obviously learn more about the story. You'll rank up Aloy, select powers that you want to use, collect better gear, take on new robots for XP to rank up, and I think there are like 36 powers, if I'm not mistaken, in the game, if I'm counting right and whatnot. So you can improve your character how you want as you go along. You pick which of the 36 powers you want to rank up, but essentially, there are only 36 powers. That has a bunch of side missions that keep you ranking up besides the main storyline. Much like Final Fantasy and other open world games, I could get lost just doing the side missions, and pretty much that's what I did at the start of this game. I got lost doing all the side missions instead of playing the main story. So I spent a lot more time doing that than actually learning what the fucking story is actually about. Now, aside from that, the only other minor RPG element of the game is like the dialogue choices. You'll come across characters, and pretty much you have three choices. You want to have a reply that's compassionate, be an asshole, or logical. Personally, I always choose the logical choice, but every now and then I want to be an asshole. And from what I can tell, and those who finish the game, you guys can elaborate a little bit more on this, but it doesn't seem like you get anything special out of picking or choosing a conversation in a different way. It's not like Mass Effect's morality system that pushed you to a paragon or a renegade. It's basically what you want your character to say, and that's really it. It has no impact on the gameplay or the story. At least for now, I haven't seen any impact on the story. Maybe at the end it might, but as of right now, it certainly doesn't. In all honesty, for those of you guys who like Assassin's Creed, for those of you who like open world games with a bunch of shit to do, this is a pretty good game. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but it's certainly worthy of the praise that it has received. Now, I know there are some Nintendo fangirls out there that want to piss all over this game, point out that Zelda has been getting higher scores or better reviews and whatnot. Now listen, Nintendo's obviously struggled over the past 4 years with the Wii U and just launched Switch, and Zelda is naturally receiving some critical acclaim as one of their greatest games they've ever created. And all the 8-year-olds like to say how much better Zelda is than Horizon Zero Dawn for some stupid ass reason, and here's the fucking reality. Of course it's supposed to be better. Zelda's been around for 30 fucking years. You would expect that game to have a high standard of quality by now. It's been in development a shitload of a longer time and didn't have to nearly hit the technical aspects of Horizon Zero Dawn in order to be a top-notch game. Look, Zelda is a different breed of RPG. It's one of the originators, for God's sake. It's also a bit of nostalgia for those who have played and enjoyed the Zelda series all these years. And naturally, nostalgia is always a good way to earn critical acclaim. Appeal to a reviewer's childhood, and they're bound to be impressed by the game. However, it's had 30 fucking years to develop it. Realistically, man, you've had 30 years to craft the stories around Hyrule, focus on creating a fun story, excellent gameplay, as opposed to having to show off your technical capability that most studios need to do when it comes to PlayStation, Xbox console exclusives. Graphics aren't everything, technical aspects aren't everything, but when it comes to those two consoles, they have to show off, look at the power of my console. This is what we're able to do. But in all honesty, good for Nintendo. They really needed a big hit because they were getting shit on the past couple of years with that badass console and even shittier games. They got a big hit with Zelda. But guess what? Zelda and Horizon Dawn are two completely different games. A comparison by the two is never going to determine which game is actually better, but just on nostalgia alone, people will naturally say Zelda is the better game. I'm sure when it comes to Game of the Year votes, Zelda is going to beat out Horizon Dawn, and there's no issue with that. It doesn't take away for how decent Horizon Zero Dawn really is. That doesn't lessen it as a game, because this is some top-notch shit that people can play right now. So for those of you out there who are looking for a game and are wondering, hey, maybe I can try this, maybe I should buy this to hold me over until Mass Effect or whatever, I highly recommend it. It was a pretty good game. And for someone that had low expectations of this game to actually say, yes, it is worthy of the praise, this is the game that I would recommend if people were to say, should I get this? Absolutely. Anyways, I finally got to my fucking Pocahontas video this week. I had fucking Destiny and Mass Effect in front of me making all their goddamn announcements. Oh, motherfucker. And then next week, of course, I gotta do no Destiny videos. Anyway, as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit. And I'll see you guys in the next video.